There is a boy nobody is thinking about. While the important people gather in the house, he is out in a field, alone with the sheep. He is the youngest, the smallest, the one they forgot to call in. When his own father is asked to line up his sons, this one does not even make the list. And that boy, the one left in the field, is the one heaven has already chosen. Not the tallest, not the strongest, not the obvious one, because people look at the outside, and God, the story is about to tell you, looks somewhere else entirely. He will kill a giant with a stone. He will be hunted through the desert for years by a king who wants him dead. He will write songs that people are still whispering 3,000 years later, at bedsides and at gravesides. He will sit on a throne, and he will fall from it in the worst way a man can fall. And when it is all over, the Bible will call him something almost impossible to believe. A man after God's own heart. His name is David. And by the end of these minutes, you will understand why God says that about him. Not because he was perfect, he was very far from perfect, but because of the one thing he never let go of. So let's begin where it all begins. In a small town called Bethlehem, on the day an old prophet comes walking up the road. The prophet's name is Samuel, and he is grieving because the first king of Israel has failed. His name was Saul, and he began so well. Tall, handsome, a head taller than everyone else, the kind of man you would choose to be king. But something in him had curdled. He stopped listening to God and started listening to his fears. And so God says to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul? Fill your horn with oil and go. I have chosen a king for myself." Among the sons of a man named Jesse in Bethlehem. So Samuel goes. And Jesse brings out his sons one by one to stand before the prophet. The eldest comes first, Eliab, tall, strong, striking. And Samuel looks at him and thinks, "Surely this is the one. Surely the Lord's anointed stands here." But God stops him. And what God says next is one of the most important sentences in the whole Bible. Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature. I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Sit with that for a moment. Everything you are anxious about being, tall enough, impressive enough, enough. God is not even looking there. He is looking at a place you cannot fake and cannot photograph. So the sons keep coming. Abinadab, Shema. 7 strong sons of Jesse pass before Samuel. And to each one, God says no. Not this one. Not this one either. Finally, Samuel is confused. He turns to Jesse and asks, "Are all your sons here?" And Jesse says, almost as an afterthought, "There is still the youngest. But he is out keeping the sheep." The youngest. The one it did not occur to anyone to invite. "Send for him," Samuel says. "We will not sit down until he comes." And they bring him in from the field, ruddy, with beautiful eyes, still a boy, still smelling of the flock. And God says simply, "Arise, anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel takes the horn of oil and pours it out over the head of the shepherd boy in front of all his brothers. And something happens that changes everything. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward. The boy from the field is now the anointed king of Israel. And almost no one knows it yet. He does not get a palace. He does not get a crown. He goes back to the sheep. And here is something worth holding on to. There are often long, quiet, unglamorous years between the promise and the throne. Meanwhile, in the palace, King Saul is unraveling. The spirit that had left him is replaced by a dark and tormenting spirit. He cannot sleep. He cannot rest. And his servants have an idea. Find someone who can play the harp. Music soothes a troubled mind. And someone says, "There is a young man in Bethlehem, a son of Jesse. He plays beautifully, and the Lord is with him. So the shepherd who was secretly anointed king is brought into the house of the very king he will one day replace. And whenever the darkness came over Saul, David would take up his harp and play, and the tormented king would grow calm. The heaviness would lift, and Saul loved him. Two men, bound together at the beginning by music, the old king and the boy who would take his place, neither of them yet knowing how it ends. But David does not stay in the palace. He goes back and forth, still tending his father's sheep, and out in those fields, alone, is where he becomes who he is. He fights a lion, he fights a bear. He learns that when you have nothing but a sling and a God, that can be enough. And then the story takes him to a valley, and to the largest man he has ever seen. Israel's army is camped on one hill, the Philistine army on another, and a valley lies between them. And every morning and every evening, for 40 days, a giant walks out into that valley. His name is Goliath, and he is enormous, 6 cubits and a span, nearly 10 feet tall. Bronze armor from head to foot, a spear like a weaver's beam, a shield bearer walking in front of him. And every day he roars the same challenge across the valley: choose a man, send him down to fight me. If he kills me, we will serve you. If I kill him, you will serve us. And every day, the whole army of Israel, including King Saul, hears him and is terrified. Nobody moves. Nobody volunteers. The head taller king hides in his tent, and into this frozen, frightened camp walks a teenage boy, carrying bread and cheese for his older brothers. David has been sent by his father to check on the soldiers. He is not a soldier. He is the delivery boy. And he hears the giant roar. And he watches every grown man around him shrink back in fear. And something in him is not afraid. It is offended. Who is this man, he asks, that he should defy the armies of the living God? His oldest brother hears him and is furious. Why did you come down here? I know your pride, your little heart. Go home to your sheep. But the words reach Saul, and Saul sends for the boy. And David says the sentence no one else in that valley will say: let no one lose heart. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine. Saul stares at him. You are a boy, he says. He has been a warrior since before you were born. And David tells him about the lion and the bear and the sheep he had rescued. The Lord who saved me from the lion and the bear will save me from this Philistine. So Saul tries to give David his own armor: bronze helmet, heavy coat of mail, a sword. And David puts it on, and he can barely walk. He takes it off. I cannot go in these, he says. I have not tested them. He will not fight this battle in someone else's armor. He will go as himself, or not at all. So he takes his staff and his sling, and he walks down to the brook running through the valley. And there he bends down and chooses 5 smooth stones from the stream bed and puts them in his shepherd's pouch. 5 small stones against nearly 10 feet of armor and iron. And he starts walking toward the giant. And Goliath sees him coming. A boy, no armor, no sword, and he is insulted. Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds. And David answers with the words that are the real heart of this whole story. You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and all the earth shall know that there is a God in Israel. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. And then the boy does not back away. He runs toward the giant. And reaching into his bag, he takes out a single stone and fits it to the sling and lets it fly. And the stone sinks into the giant's forehead. And Goliath falls face down to the earth. There was no sword in the hand of David, only a sling and a stone and the name of God. The whole valley goes silent. And then the armies of Israel roar and charge, and the Philistines run. And a shepherd boy becomes, overnight, the most famous man in the nation. And that is where the real trouble begins. Because, in the palace of King Saul, David meets the king's son, a young man named Jonathan. And a friendship is born that the Bible describes in words it uses for almost no one else. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Think about who Jonathan is. He is the king's son. He is the heir. The throne should be his. And somehow Jonathan knows and accepts that God has chosen David for it instead. And he loves him anyway. It is one of the purest friendships in all of Scripture, and David will need it, because the king is about to turn. David keeps winning battles, and the people begin to sing. As the army comes home, the women come out dancing with tambourines and songs of joy. And this is the song. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul hears it, and the number lands in him like a blade. They have given David tens of thousands, he thinks, and to me only thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom itself? And Saul eyed David from that day on. The love curdles into suspicion, the suspicion into hatred. The next day the dark spirit comes over Saul again, and David, faithful as ever, takes up his harp to soothe him. And Saul, with a spear in his hand, hurls it straight at the boy playing music for him. Twice. He tries to pin David to the wall, and twice David slips away. The man David is serving is now the man trying to kill him, and from here, David's life becomes a long flight into the wilderness. He runs, and Saul hunts him, not for days, for years. David becomes a fugitive, living in caves, in the desert, in the wild places, always one step ahead of the king's army. Broken men gather to him, the distressed, the in debt, the bitter, 400 of them, and he becomes their captain. And in those desert years, hunted and afraid, David does something that shapes the rest of the Bible. He sings. Out of those caves come the Psalms. Prayer screamed into the dark. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? He does not pretend to be fine. He brings God his fear, his anger, his loneliness, raw and unfiltered. And that, more than the giant, is the secret of David's heart. He never stopped talking to God, not even at the bottom. And then comes the moment that shows you what kind of man he really is. Saul is hunting him with 3,000 men. And one day, Saul steps alone into the very cave where David and his men are hiding. The king is right there, unaware, unguarded. David's men whisper, "This is it. God has handed your enemy to you. Kill him." And David creeps forward in the dark. And instead of taking Saul's life, he silently cuts off a corner of the king's robe. And then his heart strikes him even for that. And he says, "I will not lift my hand against the Lord's anointed." He lets Saul walk out of the cave alive, and then calls after him, holding up the piece of robe, "See, I could have killed you, and I did not." And Saul weeps, and calls him his son, and admits David is more righteous than he is, and then goes right back to hunting him, and David spares him a second time. He slips into Saul's camp at night while the whole army sleeps, and stands over the sleeping king. Again his men beg him, one blow, and again he refuses. Who can lift his hand against the Lord's anointed and be innocent? He takes only the spear and the water jug from beside Saul's head and leaves. Proof, again, that he could have, and would not. David will not seize the throne by blood, even the blood of a man trying to kill him. He will wait for God to give it, or not at all. And in the end, it is not David who takes Saul's life. The Philistines and Israel meet in battle on Mount Gilboa, and it goes badly for Saul. His sons fall around him, and among them Jonathan, the friend whose soul was knit to David's. And Saul, wounded and surrounded, falls on his own sword rather than be captured. The first king of Israel dies on a hill of defeat, and when the news reaches David, he does not celebrate, he does not gloat. He tears his clothes, he weeps. He writes a song of grief for the very man who spent years trying to kill him. How the mighty have fallen. And for Jonathan, he sings, I am distressed for you, my brother. Your love to me was wonderful. The road is finally clear, and David does not run to grab the crown. He waits, and he mourns. And then, at last, the promise made to a shepherd boy years before begins to come true. The men of Judah come and anoint David as their king. He is 30 years old, and after 7 years, all the tribes of Israel come together to him and anoint him king over the whole nation. The boy from the field, who was not even invited to his own anointing, is now king of all Israel. And his first great act as king is to capture a mountain fortress that no one had been able to take, a city called Jerusalem. He makes it his capital. From now on it will be called the City of David. And then he does something that tells you what he most wanted his kingdom to be about. He goes to bring the Ark of God, the sign of God's presence, up into the city at the very center of the nation. And as the Ark comes up the road, King David dances before the Lord with all his might. The king, in front of everyone, leaping and dancing for joy, undignified and unashamed, like a boy again. And now, at the height of his life, God comes to David with a promise unlike any before it. David wants to build God a house, a temple, a permanent home for the ark made of cedar and stone. And God sends the prophet Nathan with a beautiful reversal. You will not build me a house, David. Instead, I will build you a house, not a house of stone, a house of descendants, a dynasty, a line. When your days are over, I will raise up your offspring after you, and I will establish his kingdom. And here is the promise the rest of the Bible will lean its whole weight upon. Your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever. Your throne shall be established forever. Forever. A king from David's own line, whose throne will never end. Hold that word. The whole story is reaching toward it. David is at the summit now. King, victorious, beloved, promised an everlasting throne. And it is exactly here, at the very top, that he falls the furthest. It is spring, the season when kings go out to war. But this spring, David stays home. And one evening, restless, he walks on the roof of his palace, and he sees a woman bathing, and she is very beautiful. Her name is Bathsheba, and she is married. Her husband, Uriah, is one of David's own soldiers, away at the war the king should have been fighting. And David, who has everything, who was given everything, sees the one thing that is not his, and he takes her, and she conceives. And now the man after God's own heart does what powerful men do to cover their sin. He tries to hide it. He calls Uriah home from the front, hoping he will go to his wife, and the child will seem to be his. But Uriah is a better man than his king that night. He will not sleep in his own bed while his fellow soldiers sleep in a field. He refuses. And so David crosses a line there is no coming back from. He sends Uriah back to the battle, carrying his own death sentence. He orders his general to put Uriah in the fiercest fighting, and then pull back and leave him to die. And it is done. Uriah is killed, and David takes Bathsheba as his wife, and he thinks the matter is buried. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord, and God does not leave his beloved king in the dark with his sin. He sends the prophet Nathan, and Nathan does not accuse the king outright. He tells him a story. There were 2 men in a city, one rich, with vast flocks, one poor, with a single little ewe lamb that he loved like a daughter. And a traveler came to the rich man. And rather than take from his own thousands, the rich man stole the poor man's one lamb and killed it. And David is outraged. He burns with anger. The man who did this deserves to die. He shall restore it fourfold. And Nathan looks the king in the eye and says 4 words that split his life in 2. You are the man. You are the rich man, David. God gave you everything. And you took the one thing your servant had, and you killed him for it. And now, Nathan says, the sword shall never depart from your house. And here is the moment that explains why God still calls him a man after his own heart. David does not order the prophet killed. He does not deny it. He does not explain it away. He says 4 words back. I have sinned against the Lord. No excuses. No blaming Bathsheba. No spin. Just the truth spoken by a broken king. And out of that broken heart pours the most honest prayer in the Bible. Have mercy on me, O God. Wash me. Create in me a clean heart. That is the difference between David and Saul. Both of them sinned. Both were confronted. Saul made excuses. David broke and repented and ran back to God. God forgives him. Nathan says, the Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die. But forgiveness is not the same as no consequences. The child born of that night grows sick and dies, and David's grief is only beginning. Because Nathan's words come true, the sword does not leave his house, and the deepest wound comes from his own son. His son Absalom, handsome and charming, turns against him. He steals the hearts of the people and raises a rebellion and tries to take the throne. And David, the old king, has to flee his own city, weeping, barefoot, driven out by his own child. And when the armies finally meet, David gives one order to his commanders. Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. But in the battle, Absalom is caught by his head in the branches of a great oak, left hanging helpless. And David's general kills him there, against the king's command. And when they bring the news that the rebellion is over, that his son is dead, David does not rejoice. He climbs to a room over the gate, and he weeps the loneliest words a father ever spoke. "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. O Absalom, my son, my son." This is the cost of that night on the roof. Not a single sin, cleanly forgiven and forgotten, but a lifetime of sorrow rippling through the house he loved. And yet, through all of it, the grief and the failure and the tears, David keeps doing the one thing he always did. He turns back to God. He pours it all into songs. Nearly half the book of Psalms carries his name. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The shepherd boy who once led sheep now calls God his shepherd. Out of the depths I cry to you. Even in darkness I will fear no evil, for you are with me. That is why he is remembered. Not because he never fell, he fell terribly, but because he never stopped coming home. He was a shepherd and a giant killer, a fugitive and a king, a great sinner and a great repenter, a man who danced and a man who wept. And when he dies, an old man, the promise still stands. His throne, God had said, would last forever. And 1,000 years later, in that same small town of Bethlehem, another child would be born of David's line, and they would call him the Son of David, the king whose throne would truly never end. So the next time you feel overlooked, the one left in the field, the one nobody thought to call, remember the boy with the sling. Remember that God does not look at the outside, he looks at the heart. And remember what made David's heart different. Not that it was clean, but that whenever it broke toward God and never away from him. That is what it means to be a man after God's own heart. And that door is still open to you.